It's Nolan Arenado. It's Paul Goldschmidt. It's these teams were known to have high-level contributors. And then as we get into the season and we're expecting them to be good, they're not. Who are the three teams? Last year and immediately and apparently transferred right over this year, everyone said, why aren't they very good? Why are they wildly underperforming? And when it comes down to it, when it comes down to brass tacks, the Cardinals, the Mets, and the Padres, three teams that should be better than they are, especially last year, and it's obviously carried over from this year. What is the common denominator? The bottom line is, when you have a team with playoff aspirations, you're gonna have spots in your lineup that are better, spots in your lineup that are weaker, and you're gonna have middle of the order, high paid $30 million plus a year guys that you need to be all-star caliber players. You're not asking for the Padres, Manny Machado and Xander Bogaerts, Fernando Tatis, whoever, to all have 1,000 OPSs. You're not asking on the Mets, Lindor and Jeff McNeil to have 1,000 OPSs. You're not asking the Cardinals, Arenado and Goldschmidt to have 1,000 OPSs. What you are asking is career average or better. But you go through the Cardinals, Arenado, Goldschmidt, sub 700 OPS. Wake up, Francisco Lindor, Jeff McNeil, 666, 658 OPS. Wake, guys, wake up. Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts, 703, 565 OPS. Wake, right? Wake up. Everyone says, why weren't the Mets good last year? Why weren't the Padres good last year? I thought the Cardinals were a storied franchise that never finished under 500. Why are they sliding so bad? All three of those teams, stories last year. By the way, it's transferred over to this year. It's the same exact thing. Why? How? What's happening? Oh my God, I can't believe it. It's the stars in the lineup. Goldschmidt and Arenado have been worthless for 2 years with the Cardinals. Francisco Lindor and Jeff McNeil have been like worthless offensively for the Mets. Manny Machado and Xander Bogaerts have been horrible for the Padres. When you have a team with playoff aspirations, high payroll last year with the Mets and Padres, Cardinals are a storied franchise. When you have a team that's looking to try to make a playoff run, to get into the postseason, you need your aircraft carrier players to carry your team to a certain degree in the middle of the lineup. And when those guys don't do it, what's to say the rest of the guys are going to? When those guys, the big stars, Lindor, McNeil, Machado, Bogaerts, Arenado, and Goldschmidt, roll out every single day and seemingly take half-ass at bat, swing at garbage pitches, don't work the count, don't foul pitches off, get beat by velocity, the rest of the team is going to do the same thing or worse, right? Mets fans, if you want Brett Baty to be good, he's going to model whatever his effort level and production off of the guys making 30 million, these so-called leaders on those teams. And when Lindor has terrible at-bats and continues to underperform, Brett Baty doesn't feel any pressure because he's not getting forced. He's not getting shown by example. He doesn't have to be good because the guys that are supposed to be good aren't. And the Cardinals have all this young, controllable talent, all these guys they plan on including in their lineup in the future. Young guys they've had, Brandon Donovan and Mason Wynn and I'm missing a bunch, Nolan Gorman, you get it. The Cardinals have a bunch of these young guys that they're calling up. The Cardinals have been known historically, call dudes up, bring them up, develop them pretty well in the minors, and then they get to the bigs and the dogs. Not anymore, because that team, that organization, that group, those guys getting called up into had Adam Wainwright in the clubhouse, Yadier Molina in the clubhouse, Albert Pujols in the clubhouse. Dogs, guys that showed up every day as stars, played like stars, led by example, led by, clubhouse interaction, dugout interaction, all the different stuff that were true leadership. And that's why those guys came up and played well. I had this conversation with somebody else not too long ago, former, co-Padre. You look back on some of the best teams in baseball history, the Red Sox of the mid to late 2000s into the 2000s, the Astros of the mid 2010s up until probably this year at the end of their run. You look at the Yankees of the late 90s in general. And then you take those teams, you compare them to the teams of today's day and age. You compare them to teams of last year. Mets, number 1 payroll. Padres, number 3 payroll. Cardinals, another team you could put into that mid 2000 to late 2010s run of relevancy to today's Cardinals. What's the difference between those teams? The 90s Yankees, the 2000s Red Sox, the 2010 Cardinals. What's the difference between those teams who consistently and repeatedly showed up and performed and got into the postseason versus the teams of this days and age, the Padres, of last year and this year, the Mets of last year and this year, and the Cardinals of last year and this year. It's simple, it's basic, it's easy to understand. When you take a step back and you realize how the level of play on the field can also affect everything else off the field in the intangible. The Cardinals, the Mets, the Padres of 2023 and transferred over immediately and apparently into 2024 have a team that was assembled and built, superstar, highly compensated players that they expect to contribute at a high level in the middle of their order. Guys that are supposed to drive the runs in, guys that are supposed to have the best stats, guys that are supposed to be representing those teams in the All-Star game. Plain and simple, those guys aren't doing it for these teams. Last year and this year, Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt were and continue to be really bad. Last year and this year, Xander Bogaerts and Manny Machado on the Padres were and continue to be really bad. Last year and this year, Francisco Lindor and Jeff McNeil on the New York Mets were and this year really, really bad. And when you've got those teams with those types of players and then young, controllable talent around them getting called up that fans are excited for, high-level prospects coming in, seeing guys like that not contributing, taking half-ass at-bats, having career worst seasons, terrible effort, bad body language, not leading by example, not leading with personality, not leading in any aspect, and simply going through the motions for a lot of time, not doing anything out of their way to dig themselves out of the rut. That's called lazy. That's called building a standard. And that's called what those teams in the early 2000s, those dynasty type teams, never, ever, ever had. The Red Sox of the 2000s, the Cardinals of the late 2000s into the 2010s, Astros starting in 2015 and rolling through, the Yankees of the late 90s. Being mediocre on those teams in those organizations was unacceptable. And that was a standard that started from the top, trickled its way down into the clubhouse, and you never, ever, ever had a down year from David Ortiz on the Boston Red Sox. And if you had a down month or you had a stretch of games from him that wasn't great, he would find himself out of it. He would dig himself out of it. He'd still be the guy that's leading the clubhouse. He'd still be the guy in the dugout, joking around with guys, keeping things lighthearted. You'd get contributions elsewhere. Those guys in that clubhouse and on those rosters knew David Ortiz would find himself out of it. If at any point Albert Pujols in the mid to late 2010s for the St. Louis Cardinals ever struggled, which was rare, but if he ever struggled, those guys knew he'd be in there, man. He'd be the first guy in, last guy out. He'd be taking extra work. He'd be working in the cage. He'd be leading by example. Then he'd go into the clubhouse. He'd go in the dugout during the game. Even if he's struggling, not going to have bad body language, not going to look like he just found out his dog died, terrible look on his face, lazy effort, 3-pitch at bats where he just flails at breaking balls in the dirt. He'd go out and he'd find his way out of it. In the 2010 or in the 90s rather with the Yankees, losing wasn't just not okay, it was completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. And yeah, they had a high payroll. Yeah, they had a bunch of stars, but it was led by guys like Derek Jeter, guys like Paul O'Neill, guys like Bernie Williams, Jorge Posada, work ethic, battle, contributions, high level at bats, never giving up and never looking like they're just defeated. Go watch St. Louis Cardinals. Go watch the New York Mets. Go watch the San Diego Padres last year and especially this year because it's carried over. Go watch those guys, those horses in the middle of the order. Horses, quote unquote. Machado and Bogaerts for the Padres. Arenado and Goldschmidt for the Cardinals. Lindor and McNeil for the New York Mets. Go watch those games and just watch those guys take at bat. There's nothing there. There's nothing. There's nothing there with those at bats, those teams. There's no hard contact. There's no working the count. There's no like the same feeling you get when you turn on the Dodgers at bats. You turn on the Dodgers game. Top of the first inning, Dodgers come up to hit. Mookie, Shohei, Freddie. I know it's a tough reference point, but those other guys on those teams that are underperforming, they are getting compensated. And at certain points in their career, were on the same level and same tier as Mookie, Shohei, and Freddie Freeman. Paul Goldschmidt's got an MVP. Arenado has always been a top-level guy. Manny Machado was second MVP 2 years ago. All these guys are getting 30+ million a year, just like Mookie, just like Freddie. I know Ohtani's getting monopoly money, but they're all at one point or another top-level guys. How come Mookie, Shohei, and Freddie are astronomically better in the Dodgers lineup than those other stars in the middle of the order of the underperforming team? Why are Shohei, Mookie? Watch their at-bats and watch Paul Goldschmidt's at-bats. Watch Mookie Betts take an AB. Watch Xander Bogaerts take an at-bat. Watch Freddie Freeman conduct his business in the box. Watch Francisco Lindor. It's night and day different. It is night and day. It is astronomically different. It's in the box, 11 to 12 seconds on the pitch clock. It's short, compact swings. It's covering velocity. 97 at the top of the zone, line drive in the gap, back spin. It's breaking balls down and away, staying on it, taking it the other way. It's productive at bats. All Shohei Ohtani has done this year is hit the ball 1,000,000 miles an hour. These guys barely strike out if they do. And every time each one of those guys comes up, Mookie, Shohei, and Freddie, it's, kind of damage is he going to do right now? And half the times these guys get out, they hit the ball in the screws. It's just right at the shortstop. It's right at the center fielder. And you watch Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts, Francisco Lindor, Jeff McNeil. Watch them take at bats. It lacks any energy. There's no life. Beat consistently by velocity. They swing at really uncompetitive pitches a lot of the time. Short at bats, first pitch swings, check swings, jammed, low exit velo, ground balls, launch angles down. It's really sad to watch. But for those of us wondering, the people that maybe don't tune in every single day, or the people that don't watch anybody but their team, wondering why, man, the Padres, they're not great again. They weren't great last year. They wildly underperformed. What's going on? Man, the Mets had the #1 payroll last year. What's happening? Why do they continue to just be mediocre? The Cardinals, I thought the Cardinals were a storied franchise that never finished below 500. They had a horrible year last year, and they're in last place again this year. What's going on? It's the horses in the middle of the order for those teams. They simply they're just coasting. They're seemingly okay with being mediocre. And I say that because we've all seen all those guys be good in the past. We've all seen it. We know what they can do. We know how good they can be. And as it turns out, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to say this is the reason. All those guys also happen to be on big time buku buck monopoly guaranteed contracts. And when push comes to shove, whether Nolan Arenado or Paul Goldschmidt or Manny Machado or Xander Bogaerts or Jeff McNeil or Francisco Lindor, whether they really put up the numbers ever again, the checks are still clearing every Friday. I'm not saying that's the thing, but it certainly could be a reason to slightly de-incentivize these guys to go out and be truly great. Because we've seen all those guys be stars, MVP caliber players, top of their game. That's what got them those contracts that they have now. And then you've got those horses in the middle of the order, the guys that consistently hit 4, go out and be really mediocre and put together really ugly, boring, soft contact, strikeout at bat, swinging at bad pitches. Then you bring in the young guys around them. You bring in the complementary pieces who, you need those guys to contribute. They see the effort getting put in by the 3, 4, 5 guys. Like, well, what do I got to do? I got nothing to lose. If I go out and punch out on 3 pitches, so did Nolan Arenado. So did Manny. Who's going to get mad at me? And I'm not even supposed to be the guy. It's contagious. I'm telling you, it's contagious. The low levels of play from the horses on those teams, it is 100% contagious. And it carried over from last year. It's continued on in this year. And there's nobody on those teams that is going to pull them out of that rut. I referenced the 90s Yankees, the 2000-2010 Red Sox, the 2010 middle St. Louis Cardinals. Look at each one of those teams, every single group of guys, every single roster of teams that had storied runs, that were perennial winners, constantly making playoff appearances, constantly playing in the championship series and the World Series. What did they have? The 90s Yankees had all the dudes you could reference, Bernie and Jeter, Jorge Posada and Pettit, all the guys with not only winning pedigree, true leadership, never let the team slide into a rut for one reason or another. Would lead by example and lead in the dugout and bring guys together and would create an atmosphere and a culture that, simply put, losing was not okay. And once the Red Sox started to build it up again, they took down the Yankees and ended up winning the World Series. They never looked back. Big Papi and Manny and Dustin Pedroia, man. And all these guys showed up and it was like, I'm going to outwork you. We're all talented. We all have great teams. I'm going to outdo you. And we're going to call up some other younger guys. We're going to call up some pieces, and they're going to see the work ethic we have as highly compensated, already won the World Series type guys, but we want to be great. And we want to show them that we want to be great so that they want to be great. And it's contagious and it continues and it builds. Next thing you know, the Red Sox are in the playoffs. Every single year. 04 world champions, 07 world champions, 2013 world champions. Big Papi leading them. Guys like that. The Cardinals get into the postseason a ton. Win the World Series in 06, win it in 11. Who were their dudes? Albert Pujols, Adam Wainwright, Yadier Molina. Guys that showed up, day in and day out, put in the work, led by example, not only on the field, but off the field, and showed everybody else around them and created a culture of winning that showed people losing's not okay. Underperforming, bad body language, terrible at bats, minimal effort, 80% at bat effort. That's not going to play. We don't do that around here. And today's day and age, today's teams, those groups, the Padres, the Mets, and the Cardinals, they don't have any of that. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the guys that everybody looks up to, the guys that are getting paid the most, the guys that are supposed to be the aircraft carriers carrying these teams through potentially some tough times to come up to bat when things are going bad, they're in a 4-game losing streak, and they hit a backspin line drive into the second deck. They don't have those guys. They have the players that could do it, but Nolan Arenado and Goldschmidt on the Cardinals, Bogarts and Machado on the Padres, Lindor and McNeil on the Mets. Those are supposed to be the guys. And simply put, they haven't been, and they continue to not be. Last year and this year. And it just snowballs. It doesn't slow down. And it's contagious. And it spreads around the team. Everyone starts to realize, well, I guess if those guys are going to put in an 80% effort and go up and watch 2 pitches down the middle and swing at a ball in the dirt, or get beat by a 91-mile-an-hour fastball in the inside corner, what's to say I got to do any better than that? And that's where we are. That's how we've gotten to this point. That's how the Cardinals are in last. The Mets start the season 0-5. Padres are 3 games under 500. Nothing has changed. And until somebody comes in, right? And I don't know what it takes. I don't have all the answers. I know it's hard because these are grown men in Major League Baseball. I know. I get it. I know it's hard. You can't have one grown man go up to another grown man and go, hey man, play better. Because Manny Machado's going to say, dude, I'm making $35 million a year. Shut up. Lindor's going to say, dude, I got a 10-year contract. Who are you? Brett Beatty, right? Arenado, somebody comes up to Nolan Arenado and it's like, dude, stop taking half swings. Stop hitting balls into the ground. Work it at bat once. He's going to say, I have a 10-year contract. Shut your mouth. So I get it. I understand. I get it. But culturally speaking, the Cardinals, Mets, and Padres have lost any of that winning aspect, any of that winning culture. And it's really disappointing to see. And honestly, it sucks for, I think, the younger guys just as much as it sucks for their big time players not performing well. Because the younger guys, man, just come up into an organization where it's just lifeless. It's just flat. There's nothing there. It's boring. It's lame. Led by a bunch of guys that are getting paid like crazy that at one point or another were MVP contenders that are just going through the motions. It's sad and it sucks to see. You guys got guys like Mason Witt on the Cardinals, Jackson Merrill on the Padres, and Brett Beatty and Francisco Alvarez on the Mets coming into these teams and these organizations where it's like, hey, you're the young guy that's supposed to complement and develop underneath superstars making $30 million a year, because they're going to lead by example. They're going to show you how it's done. They're going to develop winning culture. And it's just the opposite of that. It's been nothing but the opposite. And it's sad to see. It sucks for Mets fans. It sucks for Padres fans like myself. And it sucks for Cardinals fans. But until somebody steps up, somebody comes out, I don't know what it has to be. If it's a media interview, if it's on the field, right? You take exception to an inside pitch. I don't know what it's going to take. Maybe it's straight out of Moneyball. Maybe it is straight out of Moneyball when Jeremy Giambi's dancing on the table after the team loses their 4th game in a row and Billy Beane comes in, bashes the music player in the clubhouse, asks these guys, is losing fun, right? Is losing fun? Fire the bat into the equipment room, let it rattle around a little bit, and tell these guys that's what losing's supposed to sound like. And anything at that is unacceptable. Somebody needs to freak out on these guys. Somebody needs to hold them a little bit more accountable. Because in the meantime, what these players are going to continue to do, Lindor, McNeil, Arenado, Goldschmidt, Machado, Bogarts, is they're going to just continue to go through the motions until somebody comes out and says, yo, wake up,